Hello there, Reason people. PoohBear here, and welcome to my channel. I'm going to first of all apologise. My main monitor broke. It's meant to have arrived. Well, it did arrive today, but it arrived damaged. So I'm having to try and film everything on my 4K screen. But I'm only videoing this in 1080p because of the green screen and a few other things. So not all menus are going to fit on the screen, and I don't have any zoom today. Basically, someone's asked that they wish to be able to automate these controls for the different options you've got, like note, velocity, length, duration, and maybe the curves. Now, the main issue is, obviously, if I come here and I do a quick right click, you can see there's no edit automation. Thor, being an old device, has actually given another small little issue. Usually what happens is, when you use, say, something like this knob here and you move on to here, I think of these as separate knobs. And usually what you can do is you can come along and you can remote override the separate knobs. So what I mean by that is if I go into options and remote override, you can see there's only one option for that particular knob. If we go to 0, which is quite a nice one to demonstrate with, we've got like 6 operators. You can see we've got source, course, fine, and loads of other options, but this is per operator. So when I click onto this, you can see like there's 6 arrows here and 6 arrows on a lot of stuff, which is to do with each of the operators. And we can come in and we can remote override individual operators what we wish. Over here, there happens to be 2. That's because one is to do with frequency modulation, the other one's to do with ring modulation. So depending what option you're in. But the more to the point is we can come in and we can actually remote override them individual things. But unfortunately, on Thor, we can't do that. They've done something a little bit special that obviously I could remote override this knob, and obviously if I moved my controller, that would move. And if I changed this selector here down, say something like to velocity, and then move that same knob, it would actually change the velocity. But that is like you're having to change this selector, then to change that particular control, and to do some kind of automation with that is going to be next to impossible because of the timing issues and all the rest of it. But there is a workaround. As I said, they have made available the remotes for each of these. And just for anyone says, oh, just shove it in a combinator. No, combinators don't show you all of the remotes which are possible. And in the case of Thor, it doesn't even show you these knobs in the combinator. So what I refer to these knobs, if I was to right click and do an edit remote override, and I've got to go and get that, bring this screen on, they call it pattern step knob 1. That's that special one. Whereas really the remote name for this note is actually called pattern step note 1. And obviously goes up to pattern step note 16. And then velocity is called something like pattern step vol 1 and up to vol 16. And then obviously we've got pattern step gate length and pattern step duration. And there's a pattern step curve 1 and a pattern step curve 2 up to 16s. So the mappings are, or should I say, the remotables are there. They're not exposed, and there's other devices as well. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking of something like Avenger, because Avenger actually has loads and loads and loads of remotes to it. So it's because it's got like 9 oscillators, and they have like at least 30 sort of parameters per oscillator. What you can actually automate on them is very little, because I think you don't even get above like the 3rd oscillator for the automation lanes, and hasn't got into the filters or anything else. And so so that becomes a funny one. So that might be a handy one. But most cases, this has actually added the extra horrible option that we can't remote override, which is a little bit of a pain. So it's not totally lost. So what I'm actually going to do now is actually bring in the MIDI out device. So I'm going to drop that in here. What I'm also going to do is going to edit preferences, and I've set myself up a little mapping. So I'm just going to delete that out so we can go through that, and you can download all this stuff so you don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to click on add manual, and that's opened up on another screen. Well, it's actually this screen in a different place. If I put it right at the top, hopefully all the menus will work. What you can do is you can select PoohBear, And under PoohBear, there's going to be the automation loopback. I'm going to package this up in with my Midi aware stuff. So when you download it and you come into PoohBear, you're probably going to have that, and you're probably going to have this. And the looper stuff might be even in there as well. I've done a video about how you can move your loopers around inside of the sequencer. So I'm just going to select automation loopback. Then I've got to select my MIDI port, which happens to be LoopMidi, which I'll talk about in a minute. Click OK, and that's it basically. As default, from 0 to 15 is actually going to control this particular proper automation, which what they call, sorry, it's a wrong place, the pattern step knob 1. So that's default. So just straight away by moving this, he says, oh, I've got to change this. And unfortunately, this doesn't fit on the screen. I don't know if I can scroll it up. No, I can't. So right at the bottom, I've got my LoopMidi. So that LoopMidi port matches the one I've done in my Surface controller. So now when I squiggle this particular knob, you can see we've actually got control here. The one you really, really want, and I'll talk about this more again a little bit later, is going to start at 16. 16 is doing the true note. Yeah. And 32 happens to start with the true velocity. So if I was to take this velocity value all the way down now, and we move this onto velocity, this knob here is going to go all the way down to the bottom. Whoosh, there it is, because that's controlling the velocity. So it might sound a little bit confusing because I talked about that pattern step knob 1, but I say knob 1 is a special thing where these are definitely controlling the individual things. And then from here, because obviously the whole point of this is we want to do some automation. So if I was to bring that up, and let's bring this up here, I'm just going to hit record. I'm going to start moving this here. As you can see, we're starting to get our automation recorded. So let me just record that in there. I should have done something a bit shorter. That would do for the moment. I was going to click on stop. If not, you're going to end up with nice big long lines. Let's move that over there and make this a bit shorter. That would do. And what you've got to be careful of is we've got this automation override. So you might say, hey, nothing's moving. As soon as we take off automation override, this automation is now being sent out correctly, and it's actually controlling that knob. And obviously I can hit record again. And now I'm going to do this one here. And this is actually doing the velocity. So let's go really low. Let's go really high, really low, really high. Make it a bit more noticeable. So now when I come onto my velocity, you can see it's going, oh, automation override again. Let's click that off. You can see it's going, so it's low, then it's going to go up back to high again. So you can see that's working independently from that. So we've got 2 of them lanes. By the way, I can now move this on to, say, the second step. And the same with this one. I can just move this up to the next step. These are still going to carry on working. So I can just hit record and go, right, I'm going to actually record this next knob. So here I am recording this next knob, whatever I want it to do. Let's try and make it do the opposite from what that one's doing. But you get the idea. So I can obviously do something with that. Again, I'm going to take that off. Remember your automation override, that can cause you issues. So click that off again. So now we've got 2 lanes going, and I can just move this up to something else. What we're actually really doing, this is more to do with the CC stuff on the back. We just happen to be hijacking it and using it to record in some of the automation. That's what we're actually doing. So these don't have to stay pointed to the same numbers as this. At the end of the day, there's nothing that's stopping me coming down to here, pulling up this and going, hey, I'm going to go to number 34. Here's 34. I'm just going to grab that and let's hold that down. So now we've got 2 of them going, and as you can see, they're going at virtually at the same time. I think I've actually slightly squiffed it, but you get the idea that you can just keep recording. And with the EMI, MIDI out device, the EMI is the old thing. Again, sorry, you can't see it on the screen, but at the very, very bottom, it will actually say CC 119, not 127. It only goes from CC 0 to CC 119, but that's not a problem because of the way I've done my mapping file. I've actually covered 16 channels, so if you wanted more than 119 automation lanes, you can just shove in another MIDI out device, choose MIDI channel 2, and we need to go and talk about the mapping files and things like that. So let me just put that back on 1. So that's just whizzing around doing what it's doing. So as I said, I've written a very, very basic mapping file. This is what it basically looks like. So here we go. Remember that CZ0? So that's my pattern stat 1, and I said 16. So here's 16. So just in case you're wondering where I'm getting these numbers from, and then you can scroll down, you can see velocity starts at 32. The next one's going to be 48, and then it's going to be 64. Here we go. We've got the duration stuff. Then we've got curve 1, and then we've got curve 2. This is only, obviously, I'm only using up to 111 here. But if I wanted to map out the rest of the Thor stuff, I'll actually put that onto channel 2. And then just give it like CZ0, so you just change that to a 2, obviously further down, and then that could be your filters or your amp or whatever you want to actually map out. So it's very, very basic mapping. There's nothing else in this particular mapping file. It's just got the Thor stuff in it at the moment. Most of the stuff, if you wanted to still use this map, you can still use this map. You can do the remote overrides. You don't have to worry about doing mappings. But as I say, Thor's a bit special, so we can't do it that way. And as we're here, this happens to be the actual codec file itself. So it's just a MIDI codec file. And I actually virtually took hold of Reason's MIDI multi-channel surface controller out. In fact, I wrote a mapping for that particular control surface, but it didn't work. I think they're overriding it. I think they've done something a little bit special that even though I wrote my own mapping file, it just didn't want to work. So I thought, fine, I'll just change a few names around, and yeah, hence it works. And obviously, as I said, we got up to 16 channels here, so we can actually detect all different channels. This would work from a controller, but as I say, from the MIDI out device, it just gives you a few more things. Now, for Windows users, I think I need that screen there. I like to use LoopMidi, so you just click on the download LoopMidi. I'll put the link in the description. For Mac users, you've obviously got your MIDI loopback, or you've got MIDI built into the Mac, so you can obviously go along and create yourself a MIDI port. And for LoopMidi people, sorry I can't zoom in because it's all broken. My screens are all broken. If you install this for the first time, you'll have this thing called LoopMidi port. This will all be blank. You can just come down here, type in whatever you want. So if I click on that and click on plus, it's now added a MIDI port called Fred, which was for you is show here. Me, it's going to show right at the very bottom. Here it is. Here's Fred. Minus would just delete it. And the only other good control in this little app, which is worth noting, it's got a built-in feedback detector. So if you actually do a MIDI feedback, so it's feedback on itself, it could detect it and it could mute the port. So if you're thinking, hey, something stopped working, it's always just worth double checking to make sure that hasn't gone muted. Most of the time you'll get an error message in Reason saying MIDI overflow before this actually breaks. I've never had to touch the advanced stuff in the decades I've actually run this. I've been running this, 15 plus years. There we go. It's actually last updated quite a few years ago now. That's nearly 7 years ago. It doesn't break. I've never had to worry about it. It's worked for me going back on Windows 7, and now here we are, Windows 11, and it's still working away. And as you can see, the throughput, so that's actually Reason working in the background, because I've still got the sequencer running, so it's actually sending stuff through. There's other loopbacks you can use. You don't have to use this one. It's just one that I know works reliably. What I'll also do, and I might be able to show on, have I got it here? My Dropbox, yay. So I'm going to put all the codes in my Dropbox. I'll put the link, obviously, in the description. And when you come to download it, you could click on something like download here, but I would always say select this download at the top. That way it gives you absolutely everything. This README text file is probably a little bit out of date, so I need to obviously update that. And basically under remote, under codecs, MIDI codecs, there's a PoohBear. You're going to get, this is my MIDI aware stuff, but this is the automation stuff, what we was just looking at. So you just drop it in. So if you download it from here, you can literally take that folder and you can drop it in where all your remote maps are, which again, I'll put in the descriptions, because on Windows, it's something like, is it ProgramData, Propellerhead software, and then you can just drop that remote in. It'll tell you, hey, the remote directory already exists. Say, yeah, I know. But have a look through it. I think I even said in my text file, it's always worth having a look, make sure no one's done anything bogus. But there isn't anything bogus in here. There's just some basic stuff. So I think this is my looper stuff. So I did a video on looper stuff. So you might want to have a look at that. You might not. And as I say in here, I've got my Midi aware stuff. Again, I've got a video on that. So the Midi aware stuff is you can point this at one instrument on channel 1. This could be Midi channel 2 pointing to another instrument. So this is obviously really designed for keyboards coming in. It's got multiple MIDI channels which you can switch about on. And that's what this is all about. So you can obviously just do that sort of stuff. But I say, I'll always download that. You get the whole lot. Oh, there's a little code Lua file in there because I was doing a video, and so I just dropped that in so people had that example. Okay, right, I really am waffling. I think I've done okay with this little screen for once. I think the key things are, as I say, once you've got your remote in, you saw how I set it up. It was just very straightforward. Under preferences, as I say, you click at the add manual, go into PoohBear, and then you select your automation loopback and your MIDI port. As long as this MIDI port in here, which is on another screen, I believe, there we go. As long as that MIDI port there, so if I change that to another MIDI port I've got, which I know I'm not using, called Magic, so I use that with my Magic program. Over here you can see everything stopped working, and if I come down here, is Magic on the screen? Oh, look, there's Magic. Magic's there. So as soon as I select Magic, these should all start kicking in. So, yeah, there we go. That's how a loopback works. Worth knowing, because you can control all kinds of things with a loopback. Anyway, I know I'm going to waffle, so I better shut up now. Thank you for watching. Hopefully that will give you some ideas. Bye for now.